And we're on, so we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, I have Ade Olonoh, and you're in Indianapolis, and you work for, you're founder of Formstack, which is really exciting because I've heard a lot about Formstack. And also there's another component of, or another sub-company of Formstack called Gel that we're going to talk about. So welcome and thanks for being on this podcast.
Thanks for having me. Really excited about it.
And let's start with the question I always start with, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done? And what does Formstack look like?
Right. Yeah, good question. So personally, I just carry around my MacBook and my iPhone, and I have a lot of tools, obviously, that I use to get my work done. Core to the day-to-day is Slack. We use that internally on the Gel team, and that's how we keep in touch day to day, and that's how I get a lot of my notifications, and much more so than obviously email, like a lot of people. I'll talk about it a little bit more, later, but Gel is really core to my day-to-day work and how I keep in touch with coworkers to really understand what people are focused on today, what they're working on, and how we coordinate kind of our day-to-day tasks and processes. From there, we use Zoom quite a bit too, to do video conferencing. I rarely do phone calls anymore. We just kind of made a deliberate switch to do all our, non-face-to-face conversations over Zoom, so that, it feels more in person and face-to-face. So personally, I work from my home office, probably about on average 3 days a week. It really depends on what's going on in a particular week, and then I usually spend the rest of it, if it's not coffee shops and meeting people or traveling, it's at the Formstack headquarters in Indianapolis, and so we have an office here, and basically I have a kind of a corner of a desk that I park at, but my home office is really kind of my home base, where I have my big monitor set up and kind of all my stuff and everything that's non-virtual, that I use to help me work. So that's pretty much what it looks like.
I have a monitor hub as well, 2 external monitors. It looks very high tech over here. Yeah.
Nice.
Love it. So let's go into a little bit about Formstack and like how many people work there and how many people work remote. What is the setup like?
Yeah, so we have, we're pretty close to 80 employees now. And as I mentioned, our headquarters, our home office is in Indianapolis. So Formstack was started in Indianapolis. I founded that almost 10 years ago now. And started from just me, and now grew to 80 people. But we have around 35 people that are in or around the Indianapolis area. And so the rest of them are distributed mostly in the United States. We have a handful in Canada and Europe as well. But and even those that are in Indianapolis, like myself, don't necessarily come into the office every day. We have it as a place. It's great to have an office, so that if people need to fly in and do meetings, we kind of have a central, comfortable place where logistics are figured out. And there's some people who do like to come into the office every day or most days, but for the most part, everybody that works at Formstack acts and is set up to be a remote distributed employee, whether or not you live in Indianapolis.
And so is everybody allowed to choose for themselves whether or not they come into the office?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody gets that, that flexibility and autonomy. And there are very few, I'm trying to think, I think there are probably no teams where there isn't at least one fully remote employee, meaning that, somebody that doesn't, live in the same city. And so basically it makes sense that, the way that we're set up, I mean, for the most part, day to day, you really don't notice or care whether somebody is, in a particular location on that day. So nobody's really kind of organized around you have to be in the office. With one exception, we do have a part-time office manager that kind of does some things around the office, and so she has to come in for the most part to get certain things done. So.
Sure. Yeah. Not everybody can work remotely. That is one of it's not right. It doesn't function for every job, right?
Yeah, but that's really the only exception. I mean, we have obviously engineering, design, sales, marketing, support that all works, works from home, works coffee shops, works while traveling. So really made an effort to, even if you live in Indianapolis, support remote work and support kind of your schedule and the way that you want to work.
So before I ask why it was set up, I'm really curious if you know, what are the reasons that people, when they choose to come into the office regularly, what is it, why are they choosing to come into the office? What is it that prompts that?
Yeah, it's it really differs per person. So like for me specifically, I have 3 little boys at home, and sometimes just looking at my calendar, I realize it'll be hard to do video calls once they're back from school, and so I just say I need a quiet place to go do this, and so the office is the easiest thing for me. I think some people may not love their home office setup in the same way, and so may kind of make that calculation to say I may be more productive or focused at the office, or sometimes it's just a convenience thing where if you have a meeting that's near the office, it's kind of one of those things where you say, well, might as well just work out of the office and for the rest of the day after this meeting. And so it's just kind of it's a place to park, for some people.
I really like that there's the choice of whether or not you want to work there. But I have to ask, a lot of people that I come across struggle with this format of having some people work in the office and some people not at the same time, because then you have, when you're at the office, you have high bandwidth, really intense, all fully functional, information and communication.
Right.
And that's so much more powerful. And then you have people that are left out. So how do you guys, what do you struggle with there?
Yeah, I think early on, I mean, we still struggle with it, but I think early on that was one of the biggest lessons we learned was that if we were going to support remote work, we had to be very deliberate about letting everybody be remote, not kind of partitioning the company into here are remote people and then here are people that work in the office. And so we actually started out not as a remote company. And I can get into kind of the history a little bit more, but basically, for a while during that transition, we did have, most people in the office and then a few people remote. And it was a big struggle. And really there's kind of some, aha moment or really learnings over time where we realized, for remote to work, we just really had to be deliberate about things, that I mentioned, which is even if you live, right next to the office, we had to be able to give you the freedom to not come into the office. If there were meetings in the office and there were, obviously a remote person, we had to just make sure that we're chatting virtually, sending emails or on chat or jumping on Zoom, rather than taking those shortcuts of, well, since you and I are in the office, we'll just kind of have the side meeting and we won't invite Chris because he's not here. And so we had to be very deliberate about that to get it to work. And so that's definitely a good reason why we call ourselves remote. We think of ourselves remote. The reason why few people really come into the office every day is because of trying to be deliberate about supporting each of us in our remote, fully remote or quasi-remote work situation.
So why did you make the transition from co-located to remote?
Yeah, kind of a few things happened all together, and it was a few years ago. I think probably about 4 years now. Time just kind of a blurry, but we were much smaller. We're probably about 20 people, And a few things happened at once. One is we had an opportunity to hire our first remote engineer who's based in Poland, and he's still with us. And we kind of debated whether or not that would make sense, but really wanted to figure out how to make it work. Around the same time, we had somebody who a designer who was living in Indianapolis and working at the office, and he really wanted to move to Chicago, but he didn't want to quit. So we're kind of having that discussion as well. Like, well, could he work remotely part of the time and travel back and things like that? And kind of between those two decisions, sort of have that conversation. And then our CEO, who was again in Indianapolis, his wife got a great job opportunity in Oklahoma City, which is where he's from, and similarly raised the question of, well, could we move to Oklahoma City to so that she could take that job while him as CEO worked remotely, or at least, and at the time thinking partly remotely and traveling a lot back to Indianapolis. And so kind of between those three events, and of course, lots of discussions around that time, and examples of, from Automatic and 37 Signals to others, where they talked about remote work and kind of the tools and best practices for making it successful. Really thought we'd give it a shot. And like I said, it was, it took a while, I think, to get to the point where we are to really understand what worked for us as Formstack in terms of making it work. But we decided to give it a shot for all those reasons. And really, it really came down to people. And in all those examples, it was either somebody we wanted to hire, somebody we didn't want to lose, but really needed, the opportunity to live somewhere other than Indianapolis. And so thought it was important to give it a shot to support those people.
Interesting. So there's so many questions, but one of the questions is, how did you start? Do you remember, like, what were some of the first things you did to put, policies in place, or did you guys test it out first, or?
That's a really good question. I
know it's hard to remember those kind of things because they're not,
Right. Yeah, I don't remember, I don't remember the details about the, kind of the first month, like I said, and even the timing is a little bit fuzzy in terms of what came first. I know when Chris, the CEO, moved to Oklahoma, at first he was flying back a lot to Indianapolis and meeting with people in person. Again, at the time, almost everybody was in the Indianapolis office. And so, so it was, again, that struggle that you pointed out where we weren't really a remote company. We were, a traditional company with a few people that were remote. So yeah, I really forget, I forget the all the details in terms of what happened, the first month or two, but I think, I touched on some of the key learnings where we had to go electronic a lot more. And so document decisions and meetings in Confluence, which we use internally. We use HipChat for kind of the Formstack side of things. And so started using HipChat a lot more diligently and moving conversations away from face-to-face into HipChat. Or some of the things that we did early on. But yeah, I wish I remember enough of the details of, this is what we did week 1, month 1.
Right. Yeah. I mean, these are the things I'm always just curious, like, how do people start? That's but the other thing that I had a question about was this guy in Poland. Was it a special skill that made you guys want to reach out to him, other than, because you can go,
right.
At first everybody's in Indianapolis, so I always think, like, why this Poland guy? What made him so special?
No, that's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I wasn't part of that hiring process, and I think he was. I'm almost positive we knew him through somebody. So it wasn't like we posted a job,
Right.
and he applied. I think it was we had met him, or somebody at Formstack had met him and knew him. And at the time we were trying to hire developers, which yeah, I think it was just a good fit, and so we're trying to figure
Right.
out what happened.
When somebody has a friend and they're like, I know he'd be the perfect guy. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
hard to not at
exactly,
least talk to the guy. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that network effect for hiring is so powerful. I mean, some
Right.
random person based on somebody you've worked with before and know and like, no
Yeah.
contest.
Oh, yeah. It's a no-brainer.
So what have been some of the biggest benefits that you've had from actually going from being co-located to now being remote?
Yeah. So, I mean, we just touched on one of the biggest things, which is hiring.
Right.
There's a lot of talent in Indianapolis, but by no means, would by no means would we say, even the most bullish person about the Indianapolis tech market, would we say the best people for your company are all located within a 10-mile radius of your office. So we've been able to hire much more quickly than we otherwise would have been if we were just looking in Indianapolis, and I think hire better people. Frankly, I mean, like you said, we've been able to get great people who we know through our network, or basically go through the job process, and otherwise would never have stumbled on if we were just looking remotely. So that's definitely the biggest benefit. Um, I think some things that are thrown out around benefits, like costs, really we haven't seen. We actually, in some ways, may spend more to facilitate remote work. But it's really it comes down to kind of people and hiring. Yeah, I think that's the biggest benefit for sure.
It almost seems crazy to think that you can build a company of the size of Formstack of people all in the same city. And in a way, it seems like, okay,
Right,
you
right.
could do it, but 80 programmers is a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a
Or I
lot
mean,
of
okay, not
people.
all programmers, but
Yeah, not
people is a
all.
lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from all in one place. So yeah, in a way, it almost seems like an old-fashioned idea to me. But I'm so biased. I can't.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm pretty biased. I mean, some. Yeah, I mean, others have done it in Indianapolis and are still doing it. Probably one of the biggest success stories of late is Exact Target, which I think had probably close to 1,000 employees. Tech company
Wow.
here in Indianapolis. I might have that number wrong, but was recently acquired by Salesforce for $2.5 billion. So there's a lot of talent here that's in tech and all that. But yeah, it's not just about finding the number of people, but finding the best people and the people that are the best fit for the company. Yeah, and today definitely more so than 10 years ago, the tools are definitely there to facilitate that in a much more meaningful way. There's a lot more, I mean, through things like this, people have been sharing more about kind of best practices and what's worked for them. So, the playbook is out there, whereas in the past it really wasn't so much. So, yeah,
Yeah, indeed.
it's a lot more feasible.
The technology has come a long way in the last 5 years. I mean, I'm like, no, revisit video conferencing equipment. I swear it's not like it used to be, the spider, it's like, no, it's way better. So,
Right,
but
for
in
sure.
terms of tools, I want to dive into Gel and talk about
Yeah.
what Gel is, because I was really excited when I looked at it today. And in fact, my team's going to start using it soon. So, oh, this is really
That's great to hear. That's awesome.
So tell us a little bit about what Gel is and what it does, and then why you built it. Okay, that's a big
Yeah.
question all at once, but
Yeah, no, and it actually fits very much into the Formstack remote story. Quite simply, we built it for ourselves at first. So after we made the decision to go remotely, we realized that daily stand-ups were really a big pain with a remote team, and especially once we started, growing with people from different time zones. So, again, I mentioned, our first fully remote person was the developer in Poland, and he worked a later schedule to kind of overlap a little bit with the Eastern time zone. But basically, we found that getting everybody on the phone or on a video conference at the same time every single day, and really doing a stand-up meeting in the way that you're supposed to do, which is quick, concise, short. It was really just a struggle, and there's so much overhead to do that. And so internally, it was kind of a hack week, sort of internally, and a bunch of people on the team put together kind of what was the predecessor to Gel. And it was basically a very simple tool where instead of everybody jumping on the phone every day to do daily stand-ups, you just posted your answers to kind of the 3 standard daily stand-up questions. What did you accomplish yesterday? What are you planning to do today? And what problems are you running into? And so that was it. Basically, you posted it on this tool, and everybody could kind of see everybody's answers. And it's I think it also sent it via email. So internally, we found this as a solution to just get rid of those daily stand-up meetings, but really still kind of have that day-to-day understanding of what's everybody focused on. So like I said, we built it as kind of a hack day project, and it just kind of sat there for a while. And then a couple of years later, so sometime last year, or about a year ago, myself and a couple others decided to spend some time really building that out, because there's just a long laundry list of things that wish lists, features, and things like that people wanted internally. And we thought, this may be something that we could kind of clean up better and re-release out to the public. And so that's kind of what happened with Gel. And basically, our vision for that was still helping facilitate the daily stand-up as kind of the core of Gel, but saw so much more opportunity around just helping facilitate structured communication, which is extremely important in any company, whether you're remote or not. But we found that, especially being remote, having kind of that repository of information about what everybody's focused on, what their goals are, et cetera, is so key to really being able to work effectively day to day. And so our long-term vision for that is for Gel to be the place where you track long-term goals, and you track kind of the day-to-day activity and see how those things align with each other. So that's what Gel is right now.
What I really like about it also is that it gives you that information in written form,
Mm-hmm.
which for me, because when I'm in stand-ups, I don't remember at all really what other people were working on unless I'm directly involved. And then the next day you think like, I didn't remember anyway.
Right.
I like this. It seems like there's more accountability there, or I don't know. Have you
Yeah, for sure.
that?
What we've found and hear over and over is that it definitely helps bring accountability. It definitely helps each person. There's something about the when you start your day really answering those questions. It really helps you focus and be more deliberate about your work. I have long had the experience of stand-up meetings, and I'm sure most people have too, where everybody kind of packs into a room and all stares at the manager and kind of reports to the manager. And I know in stand-ups, everybody talks, about how stand-up meetings shouldn't be a reporting meeting. It should be about the team communicating. But in practice, that rarely happens. Everybody kind of regurgitates. They walk into the meeting, and it's kind of this hurried, like, oh crap, what did I do yesterday?
Right.
What am I going to do today? And most people either miss things, or typically what happens too is you throw out 10 ambitious tasks that you think you're going to complete today, and of course that doesn't happen. And then the next day you repeat the same thing, and my experience has been everybody sitting in that circle facing the manager. And if you're not talking, your eyes are glazing over. Like nobody's listening, nobody's paying attention. It's just a chore, and everybody hates it. The manager hates it. Individuals hate it. What I think Gel provides is, yes, the written the written stand up helps bring that accountability. It also is just much more effective throughout the day. Like I find myself, going back several times throughout the day, reminding myself, okay, here are the top 3 things that I wanted to accomplish. Here's what my coworkers are really focused on. Here's what they finished yesterday, and having that in written form really allows you to do that, and it's just much more meaningful. As a manager, you can go back and look and see, what did Michael say he was working on last week, and it's just so much more valuable and useful. We still do face-to-face meetings for sure, but the other thing that the Gel does is it takes kind of that, like, the minutia of task reporting into the app, and so that meetings are a lot more strategic and not reporting by nature.
Yeah.
So most meetings, we start the meeting and we already know what each other are working on, what we're focused on, and really talk more about the high level things rather than spending the first half hour of a meeting kind of catching up and saying, okay, this is done, that's done. Oh, I haven't even started this yet. All that stuff is in Gel, and it's much easier to do, within an app in a few minutes a day.
It's like you get the boring stuff
Right.
where it should be, and then you've got the more, like, when you need the brain power of actually talking together, then the boring stuff's like out of the way. You could
Right.
actually get to the meat,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's our time is so valuable, of course, and to be able to spend the valuable time we have meeting on kind of the more high level things is just so much more important. The other thing that it brings too is Gel is asynchronous as well, and so basically for me, I may start my day at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's really important for me to think about what I'm the top 3 things I'm going to do today as soon as I start my day. Somebody else may start at 9 o'clock. Somebody else may start, different time zone, may start at 10 o'clock, and so on and so forth. And so really, the other thing that it helps do is I don't have a meeting set up a few hours into my day after I'm already in the zone, after I'm already tackling a few things. Like, I can report on those things and kind of identify the things that I'm going to do today when it's useful to me, not at a time where we've just kind of agreed, like, okay, we all have this 15-30 minutes on the schedule, and so we can do this meeting. And so that also helps from just an efficiency, productivity standpoint as well.
Interesting. Super interesting. Yeah, meetings really are. I overloaded myself last year. I really noticed because, I just was so interested in all these things. But
right.
But if you have meetings on every single day, you're right, it totally interrupts the flow because you can't work that whole day because you've got this one thing. And
oh yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of research around, context switching and things like that. But yeah, for me personally, I know if I have a meeting in 30 minutes, my next 30 minutes is not going to be productive because, like, I can't get into the zone and tackle some meaty and important things.
Totally. What I really like about this is that it sounds like I heard about this concept a couple of years ago called working out loud. It was
Okay.
a guy named John Stepper in Germany who, he made it more popular. It was around for a long time, but it's the idea that you're making your work more transparent to the people that
Right.
you're working with. And this sounds like, to me, a great way of working out loud because you just know what everybody's doing and when, and it's on your own time and their own time as well. So for a remote team, sounds genius.
Yeah, no, that definitely seems like it fits in really well. The other thing I'd point out is that's a little bit ironic is, we still use, other tools to do issue tracking and so we use GitHub internally. We use Trello. From time to time we use other kind of task management tools. And what happens is sometimes, like, we had fallen into kind of that trap of saying, like, well, everything I do is in GitHub. So when I push code to GitHub or close an issue or take an issue in GitHub, you'll know what I'm working on. But the thing that we realized, with Gel is that if you are that the discussion of the answer to the question of what am I focused on today are really a little bit different than the list of things that you generally have in your task manager or your issue list, your bug tracker internally. And so, kind of to your point of working out loud, it really does, hearing in my own words. Here are the things that I want to accomplish today. Here are the things that were most important that I accomplished yesterday. Really is a much more meaningful, approach than just, kind of assuming that everybody else is going to look at that, like, feed from Trello or GitHub or Asana or whatever, to see all the minutia of, here are the 10 tickets I closed yesterday. Right. And so, what's I guess, the point is, it's ironic that as we have more and more tools, internally, for, no matter what team you are, for managing work, in some ways it's become too much noise to where there's a lot of noise, but we really don't understand, what people are really focused on, what their goals are. And so, Gel is helping to kind of facilitate that. So it's more meaningful content. And so, and it's been, I know I'm extremely biased, but it's been really funny. When we first started working on Gel full time, it was mostly myself and one other person. For a while we were like, well, there's just two of us. We should know what we're working on, right? But so much information came out of just that habit of posting on Gel every day that I was just shocked that so much could fall through the cracks when we're only paying attention to kind of GitHub or other tools.
Or when there's just two people, where you think like, how much could they miss? But
right, exactly, exactly. And
but
imagine, with 80 people for sure today, that's so much more important. But
yeah, it sounds like you can just take a meta level of like, okay, here's in general the
right,
my focus areas for today, and then the small stuff is just, it's all part of the focus area, and
right,
people don't need to know that level. A few
right.
people need to load that level, but
Yeah, and it really depends on the role. Obviously, if you're in support, you don't need to share with your team. I close this ticket. I close this ticket. I close.
right.
Because you may close several dozen tickets a day. But really understanding. Okay, like here are the key things. Maybe one of the things is here's an aggregate how many things I closed, but or more other meaningful metrics around that. But maybe it's something more like here's what I'm hearing a lot from people today that would be interesting to know. People are having trouble with this, or here's this. I updated this knowledge base article with this, and so things that are more meaningful and useful to the group. And again, back to in my experience, that written form. People really do maybe take a second longer to think about it than they would in kind of that, the physical stand-up. And the content is generally a lot more useful to the team, and less of that, like, I'm just speaking to my manager. So my manager, thinks that I did a lot of stuff yesterday, right? So the written form does help with that, at least what I've seen so far.
Well, also, you don't have a productive day every day. Even
Right.
there's some days where it's just like, oh man, it's not happening today.
Yeah.
You just struggle through, and then if you have to report that in a meeting in front of everybody of like, you guys, I just gave up at 1
Right.
p.m. called it a day. You're not gonna do it. You'll know. I'll never be honest if I had to be.
Right. There's just so much social pressure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially, yeah. So I really like this idea. Okay, so I could go on and on and on, but I'm realizing now that I'm going way over time.
Sorry about
But
that.
let's end with two last questions. One is, what kind of advice would you give for people who are starting out? Like if they're transitioning from a co-located to a remote team, like what would you tell people?
Yeah, there's probably two things. One is definitely gather as much information you can about best practices, et cetera, but really just start with a focus around iteration and just experimentation. So for us, we've tried a lot of different things, and even today we don't feel like we've got it right, and trying, continually trying new things to help people, work more effectively, and improve relationships. The reality is, maybe that's a slight tangent. The reality is, all of the things that we struggle with in Formstack, with remote work, I've struggled with in other companies where we weren't remote. And so part of it is just, the problems around communication and hiring and, management and stuff like that anyway. And so anyway, all that to say is that, if you're starting out with a remote, I would just, experiment with a bunch of things. So some of that may be, how important is it for you to be face-to-face, and what's that cadence that makes sense for you and your team? For Formstack, we get together, we have an all-hands event once a year, and we started that a few years ago, and then quickly realized, you know what, once a year isn't enough. And so we basically mandated that each department also has to have a department all hands once a year. So that's twice a year. And then we realized that for certain teams, especially that, like, for example, the leadership team needs to meet face-to-face much more frequent than that. And so we've really kind of experimented a lot with those cadences around how often we meet. Tools, obviously, like, probably hundreds of tools you can experiment with, iterate with, etc. But I would focus less on the tools. Probably my second point in terms of thinking, focus less on the tools and more on the process. And so, again, part of the reason why Gel has been very important for us is it really kind of enforces that discipline a little bit around process. And it doesn't take a lot of time to use, but just that being deliberate about writing down, I mean, it sounds simple, but everybody writing down what they're going to do that day is so important and so key into just like clearing up communication and transparency and all those things. But it's not the tool, it's really that process. And so really thinking through what are the processes that make sense to help you be more successful remote, because kind of the thing that I think people see is if you're all working together in an office, you may have really horrible processes, but sometimes, like the fact that you're next to each other, sometimes serendipity may make up for the fact that you have really bad processes, because you peek over and you see that somebody's working on something that you've already started working on, or you overhear something and it kind of catches that mistake. And again, when you're remote, you don't have that serendipity of being able to see people, to catch what's falling through the cracks. So instituting processes around communication is really key. So again, the two bits of advice is really experiment. Don't be afraid to kind of change things up frequently, and then to really think hard and around being deliberate with your communication and setting up good, solid processes around doing that.
Brilliant advice. Really, I agree 100%. Absolutely 100%. So I'm happy somebody else who said something very similar in another interview I'll introduce you to.
Okay, awesome.
I'll send you the interview. So really great. So last question though is, if people want to know more about Gel, they can obviously go to gel.com.
Right.
How do they get in touch with you? How do they learn more about you?
Sure, yeah. Feel free. Anybody can shoot me an email. It's ade@gel.com. That's ADE at JELL.com. Yeah, I'm happy to chat with anybody more about Gel, or just share more stories about kind of our transition to remote at Formstack and kind of things we do internally. And then to learn more about Gel, obviously you can check out the site. We have a lot of info there, and we have free accounts, so you can sign up and start using it today. And definitely, if you do that, shoot me an email and then send me your feedback. Always looking forward to hearing that.
I'll be one of those people for sure who's signing
Awesome.
up.
That's great.
I'm totally excited about your product. I think it's a great product. So
thank you.
From people out there listening, definitely check this one out if you're working on a remote team. I mean, I watched the video and it was like, oh, I immediately posted to a number of people. I liked it. So I wish you guys
so great to hear.
and making this happen.
Thank you.
So, all right, everybody, we've come to the end of another great interview. And until next time, be powerful.